brothers. So, hey, can you make out the slide there or the screen? Okay. All right. So last week when we left our intrepid band of brothers, they had come back for the second time. They come back to Egypt, and remember Joseph. They brought Benjamin with them, and Joseph had thrown a big banquet. And you notice I'm not doing a summary or anything. I'm just remembering last week.
Yeah, they stole the
So it's not a review. No, it's not a review. We're just remembering. So they had a big banquet. Remember that? Plenty of food, plenty to drink, plenty of wine. I figured that none of them felt too good in the morning. It's probably why they didn't check their sacks. Because, if it had been me, first thing I'd have done is check the bag. Like, okay, I don't want this to happen to me again, right? But they didn't check. So the next morning, we seen them. They were headed home. They got on their donkeys, got all their grain packed, and off they went. So Joseph has set the stage. Okay? He's wined them. He's dined them. He's put them to bed. He's put all their money back in their in their sacks, and he snuck his silver cup in there. Right? Snuck that in there. But he intentionally at the banquet he set them in birth order. Remember that? Oldest to youngest. He lavishes food on the baby, that's Benjamin. Lavishes food on the baby to spring his trap. That's the trap. He plants the cup in Benjamin's sack, and he plays up the importance of the cup. Remember, all this was last week. This is what my master tells the future with, right? It's not just a silver cup. It's much more important than that. All this is played up. We'll see this again, okay? Remember, he set the expectation of punishment. When they caught up to him, he said, the man who has the cup, right? The butler, he said, the man who has the cup, that's the man that we're going to punish. He's going to prison. He's going to jail. And so he sets that expectation of punishment. Only the one who stole the cup. Remember, they said, no, we'll only the one who stole the cup. That's the only guy I want. The rest of y'all are free to go. He springs the trap on him. Benjamin is caught red-handed, right? They start opening bags. There's the cup in the bag. Remember, this was all last week. There's the cup in the bag. Can you imagine that moment? When the brothers, they thought, hey, we're coming out again, and here's the guy. Now they're looking for some cup. Well, you can search anything you want. We're innocent, and there's this cup. Okay. Now remember, the other thing that we talked about was it appears as though Joseph had done everything he could to drive a wedge. Remember, we talked a little bit about this. That cup was the wedge, okay? To drive a wedge between the brothers, the older brothers, and the baby, the younger brother, right? And so he sits them in birth order around the table. Why? He's reminding them, at least in their eyes, who's the oldest, who's the most important, right? And then he gives the baby 5 times as much food, right? So yeah, you're getting a drumstick, but Benjamin's getting a whole turkey, right? And what he's trying to do is foster more of those feelings that he experienced himself, right? Oh, the baby gets everything he wants. The baby's always got the better way, right? And so he's trying to drive that dynamic again. Not because he wants the family to fall apart, but it's a test. Remember, it's been 20 some odd years and he hasn't seen his brothers. What he honestly wants to know is, are they still the same? That's the dynamic at work here. Now, also remember that up until his brothers came back the first time, right, is he doesn't know why his father didn't come looking for him. He doesn't have a clue, right? So in his mind, the family just turned their back on him. And then he finds out when his brothers come back, right, they tell him, our younger brother died. And he starts to put two and two together. And we see when they come back the second time, the first time he never asked about his dad. The second time, how's the old man? Is he well? Right? That's telling. Is he well? Right? He's beginning to realize that God had sent him there a purpose. Right? That this was intended. This was by design. That his family didn't hate him. And so he's beginning to reconnect with his family. Okay? And so we see that. So Benjamin, he's caught red-handed, as it were. And again, it's reiterated there on the trail. No, I only need to bring Benjamin back. Okay? I only need to bring Benjamin back. In verse 13, though, we see that all the brothers returned. They didn't have to come back. All right? But they came back. So immediately now, what we're beginning to see is the shift, the change that has happened in the brothers. Right? They could have went on home. They could have went on home. But they turned. Only Benjamin was under arrest. Only Benjamin was compelled to return. But they all came back with him. This is an important point, right? The brothers have begun to act as a family. And this is what Joseph wants to see. How do the brothers react in adversity? Right? How many of y'all have heard the term, blood is thicker than water? Right? You know what that means? That means that family sticks through hard times. Family doesn't run. Right? Water runs off. Blood doesn't run. They stick. If it gets hard, if it gets difficult, the brother, the sister, the aunt, the uncle, they're the ones that are going to be there. Right? Well, when Joseph was young, when he was 17, his brothers turned him in. Right? They turned on him. Right? They sold him. Right? So he needs to know, are y'all the same? And so we're beginning to see that. So he's really hammering on that. Okay, so let's pick up our narrative now. We're going to be in Genesis 44. We're going to start reading at verse 16. All right, so they're coming back off the trail. When they come back off the trail, Joseph is still at the house. So Joseph knew they were coming back. Right? He's waiting to see how his plan is going to unfold. And so when they come back, they go right back to Joseph's house. But all the brothers show up. I wonder what Joseph is thinking when he sees all of his brothers returning, right? Not just dragging Benjamin back in chains, but all of the brothers are coming back with him, right? He's got to be thinking, wait, what does this really mean, right? He's got to be really considering this, okay? And so when they show up, remember Joseph says, "Do you think I'm an idiot that I couldn't tell what was in the house with me and what wasn't in the house with me," right? And remember what he said about the cup, right? This is important. One of the little nuances of the story. It's how I foretell the future. He set himself up as a diviner, someone who could see into the future. Why? Right? Because he set them all in birth order, right? He knew who the favorite was. All of this is playing up so that he can play this role with them. Right? The cup is the key to my supernatural vision, and y'all have stolen it, and there is going to be a tough price to be paid for this, right? And so he's basically accused him again. And then something miraculous happens. This is where we left off last week. Something miraculous happens. He makes the accusation. He says, you think I'm an idiot, right? I knew you knew I was going to figure this out. And you've stolen from me after I showed you such kindness. And Judah steps forward, okay? Judah answered, "Oh, my Lord, what can we say to you? How can we explain this? How can we prove our innocence? God is punishing us for our sins. My Lord, we have all, look at this, we have all returned to be your slaves." All of us. Not just our brother who had your cup in his sack. "No," Joseph said, "I would never do such a thing. Only the man who stole the cup will be my slave. The rest of you may go back to your father in peace." Okay, remember I talked about that cup being a wedge? We talked last week a little bit about firewood. Who's ever split firewood, right? And you put a cut in that firewood, you take a wedge, you tap it in, and then what do? You hammer that wedge, right? You drive that wedge down, and what happens to the wood? It splits apart. All right? The cup is the wedge. Benjamin's on one side, the brothers are on the other side, and Joseph has just pinged that wedge with a sledgehammer. Right? He's trying to split the family apart. Why? Because they left him. They sold him. They abandoned him. He got to know if they're worth saving. Right? So hammering the wedge. The brothers try to excuse or try to defend themselves, and that's what Judah's basically saying. How can we defend ourselves? The gold is in our sack, or the silver is in our sacks. The cup was in Benjamin's sack. We have no defense. There's nothing we can say. There's nothing we could do. Judah realizes the futility of trying to argue that we didn't do it. He knows he's caught, right? He knows he didn't do it, but he knows there's no way he can prove that. Okay? And then this is key, right? How can we prove our innocence? He said, God is punishing us for our sins. Here is finally a public acknowledgement that they had been carrying around a great sin. Now you remember in their first visit, as they talked amongst themselves, they didn't know Joseph. They still don't know that Joseph can understand them. But they were talking amongst themselves, and what did they say? God's repaying us for our sin. We're losing another brother, right? And so now Judah is admitting this is punishment for our sins. And we have realized that. We have come to grips with that, right? This is punishment for our sins. He's not talking about stealing the cup, of course. He's talking about selling Joseph. That's what they really mean. That's the sin. Remember, we've seen that all through this story, that guilt, that nagging, shadowy guilt that keeps popping up in everything that they do, right? There's an old hymn, right, that has this phrase in it: "What a change in my soul has been wrought since Jesus came into my life," right? Right? So what are we seeing here? We're seeing a change in the brothers, right? Now, remember also that as a family, right, we talked about this, as a family, this group of brothers was incredibly dysfunctional, right? They're selling off the baby of the family. Well, first they were going to kill him, right? Then they're selling him off. And then Judah, the spokesman here, he's having an affair with his daughter-in-law, but it's okay because he thinks she's a prostitute. And, right? But it's deeper than that, right? Because he's basically sent her home with a promise that he doesn't intend to keep, with an obligation that he doesn't intend to fulfill, right? But notice here the brothers, right? They refuse to leave Benjamin, right? What did Judah say? We have all returned to be your slaves. What happens to one happens to all. What was the motto of the Three Musketeers? You remember? All for one, one for all, right? One of the things I was reading about the Middle East, about the wars in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iran, and all that. UN soldiers from other countries, France, Belgium, wherever, you name a country, they had soldiers there. One thing they almost always said is if they were going to be deployed into a combat area, they wanted to be close to American soldiers. And when they were asked why, what they said was, when you attack an American soldier, you attack all American soldiers. Right? And so if one of them gets on the radio and calls for help, the whole garrison is coming. They are coming after that guy, right? They're not leaving him behind, right? And so here what we see is we see that kind of loyalty beginning to be forged in our brothers. You know, if one of us is in trouble, all of us are in trouble. If one of us is attacked, we're all attacked, right? They're starting to come together. Remember, it's the deal, right? Only the one with the cup. And so you see, what we see is now Joseph is hammering that wedge, right? He's reminding him, no, I don't need all of you. I just want one of you. Right? He's trying to separate Benjamin from the family. Now, this carries with it a little bit of a parallel to the New Testament, right? What are we taught in the New Testament about the love of God? He says, I hold you in my hand, and nothing, Paul taught us this, right? Nothing can take us out of the hand of God. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. There is no wedge sharp enough, no hammer big enough to separate us. One of the things that happens to us as we go through life is a loss of the feeling of worthiness, right? If you ain't been there yet, you will be, right? Where you look in the mirror and you go, I'm just not worthy. I'm not feeling it. You know, I've been doing this for years and years and years, and I'm just not where I think I should be, right? And you begin to feel not worthy. So the thing we have to remember is you were never worthy to begin with. That is not why Jesus picked you to be on his team. Now, we've talked about this before several times, in fact. Remember in school, elementary school, when the two most popular people in the class were chosen as team captains, and they started picking teams. Remember that? I don't care what you were playing, kickball, dodgeball, Red Rover, whatever it was. Red Rover, let Larry come over, right? You never played that? You never did that? Okay. So no matter what it was, right? And who was the first person that the captain would pick? He would pick his best buddy, right? That's who he'd pick first. And then they would consult. They say, oh no, get Lane, because boy, he's really good, right? We'd win if he's on our team. We're going to pick Lane. And so you go all the way down, and pretty soon you got two or three guys, me, say Shane, says Shane, I was one of them guys, right? Me and Shane were standing there kind of, and nobody wants us, right? Nobody picks. You're standing there, you're the last one or two or three of you, and you know that, you don't fit in with the popular crowd, and you don't really bring a lot of athletic ability to the table, okay? And so, if you were going to kick the ball, what you would end up doing is kicking your own foot out from under you, right? Okay? So, you're a late bloomer, coordination didn't come in soon enough. Travis is over here going, yeah, that was me.
I'm trying to figure out how you do that.
You have to be 8 years old. Okay. Jesus, when he was picking teams, he didn't look at somebody and go, oh, you'll make a great preacher. Oh, you're going to be a wonderful miracle worker. Oh, you're going to be a great Bible scholar, right? We weren't worthy. He picked us, in fact, in spite of our worth. I want you on my team because I want you. Right? I want you. I want you to be with me. I'm going to win the game. I got all the ability we need. I just want you here to be with me. Right? And when we start to figure that out, we realize that our own self-worth doesn't matter. And so when they hammer that wedge, right, they can't separate us from God because God doesn't need us. There's nothing we bring to the table. He wanted us. And so Satan comes and says, you know what a rat that Eric is? Do you know how bad he really is? And God don't have to go, wait, what? God just says, yeah, I know. I chose him anyway. I knew all of that, and I chose him. I saw him when he was at his worst. I didn't pick him at his best. I didn't pick him in that shining moment when he was witnessing to that guy or that gal, and they fell down and accepted my son as Savior. No, that's not when I picked him. I picked him when he was at his worst. That's when I wanted him. So there's no wedge that can be driven between us and God. And that's the parallel here, right? The brothers have come together. And Joseph is going to hammer that wedge, right, to see if they're going to crack. That's the test, right? So let's continue our story here. Genesis 18:33. Then Judah stepped forward and said, please, my Lord, let your servant say just one word to you. Please do not be angry with me, even though you are as powerful as Pharaoh himself. My Lord, previously you asked us, your servants, do you have a father or brother? And we responded, yes, my Lord, we have a father who's an old man, and his youngest son is a child of his old age. His full brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children. Our father loves him very much, and you said to us, bring him here, so I can see him with my own eyes. But we said to you, my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father, for he would die. But you told us, unless your youngest brother comes with you, you will never see my face again. So we returned to your servant, our father, and told him what you had said. And later, when he said, go back again and buy us more food, we replied, we can't go unless you let our youngest brother go with us. We will never get to see the man's face unless our younger brother is with us. And then my father said to us, as you know, of course they know, they've been telling Joseph all about it. As you know, my wife had 2 sons. One of them went away and never returned. Doubtless, he was torn to pieces by some wild animal. I've never seen him since. Now, if you take his brother away from me and any harm comes to him, you will send this grieving, white-haired man to his grave. And now, my Lord, I cannot go back to my father without the boy. Our father's life is bound up in the boy's life. If he sees that the boy is not with us, our father will die. We, your servants, will indeed be responsible for sending that grieving, white-haired man to his grave. My Lord, I guaranteed to my father that I would take care of the boy. I told him, if I don't bring him back to you, I will bear the blame forever. So please, my Lord, let me stay here as a slave instead of the boy. Let the boy return with his brothers. For how can I return to my father if the boy is not with me? I could not bear to see the anguish this would cause my father. What a speech, okay? What a plea. This is Joseph. This is the one who saw, this is a Jew. This is the one who saw Joseph coming and said, kill him! I'll tell Dad. And he did, right? Oh, look, we found this coat. Is this Joseph's coat? We're not sure. Looks like something got him, Dad. Right? And here we see him grieving. He's broken up because he knows what this will do to his father. Now, he's also bargaining for Benjamin, right? And he's offered up his own life. So what do we see? Transformation. Judah has become the Lion of Israel. Right? We see that a lot. That Judah has become the premier brother in the family. All right? He was heartless before. Right? We saw this. He was heartless. He sold to his brother. He lied to his father. He lied to his daughter-in-law. This is somebody that you couldn't trust as far as you could throw it. Right? All of these actions were because he thought only of himself. He cared only for himself. His whole life was focused on what does Judah want and how does Judah get ahead. That was it. Right? Now, think about that for a moment and then compare it to yourself before Christ. Right? Our focus is what? When we don't have Jesus to focus on, where is our focus? The focus is on us. Right? Satan blinds us to God so he can keep our eyes on ourselves. In all honesty, this is what happened in the Garden of Eden. Right? I mean, there's so much going on here that parallels our entire story. Right? Satan goes to Eve, and what does he tell her? Oh, well, God's lied to you. Right? That fruit will make what? Make you wise. Get your eyes off of God and His wisdom, and get your eyes on yourself. You can be like God. Oh, right? And then Adam was right there watching, and he was like, well, she didn't drop dead, so, hey, I'll take a little bit of that, right? And that's everything that's going on here. But suddenly, Judah has become something he was not, right? The hand of God is on him. The hand of God is on him. Now he thinks of his father and his brother Benjamin. He's seen what happened to his father before with Joseph. Now he has to see it again. Benjamin would be left behind. He can't bear it. He can't bear to leave Benjamin behind because all he can hear are the cries and the anguish of Joseph in his memory. And all he can see in front of him are the cries and the anguish of his father. Right? I know I keep hitting this. I'm trying to make sure we understand. We read this story and we just blitz right through it, and we don't stop to see the emotion that's driving this, right? This family is almost on the verge of being torn apart. But God has a plan. He's going to forge a nation, right? And so he has to have the brothers united first before he can ever make a nation, right? So old things are passed away. Notice he does not offer to stay with Benjamin, right? He offers to stay instead of Benjamin. And this care, this concern, this emotional plea, it drives him to speak to a man that is furious at the offense that's been committed, right? We see him, he says, please, don't be angry. Let me speak. Let me plead the case. You notice he's not pleading, let me go. He's going to say, let Benjamin go. I'll stay. Now, all the brothers had returned. Judah's the only one speaking, but all the brothers had returned. And what that implies is that if the man had said, okay, but two of you must stay, the brothers were volunteering for that, right? That's why they're there. Their very presence means if he takes two of us, if he takes three of us, if he takes four of us, we will fill that number with our ranks. Benjamin goes home. He risks his life, so to speak. Okay? He's risking his life. If not his actual breathing life, he's risking life as he knows it. He will never go home and be his own man again. He will live and work at the pleasure of the Pharaoh. Right? That's, in his perspective, that's what he's doing. He's giving it up. Right? Who else does that sound like? That's exactly what Jesus did. He was willing to give up his life. The Father told Jesus before he left heaven, I give you the power to lay down your life and to pick it up again. I want you to think about something. From Jesus' perspective. Now, he is the Son of God. But a God, i.e. the Father, the Son, or the Holy Spirit, had never died before. Right? All Jesus has to go on is what the Father told him. I give you the authority to lay down your life and to pick it up again. And Jesus goes to the cross on the Word of God to save his little brother. Right? This is an incredible moment that we see in history here, okay? Now, he's honoring his promise. You remember he made a promise to his father. He's giving up his life. For Judah in this moment, it's not theoretical. He's not thinking, okay, I'm going to make a really good argument and I'm going to get out of this. It wouldn't have worked otherwise. It's just like with Abraham. Abraham couldn't just put Isaac on the altar and say, okay, I've laid him on the altar. Right? What had God told him? Sacrifice your son. He couldn't pick up the knife and say, okay, I got the knife in my hand. Isaac's on the altar. Right? He couldn't raise his hand, or however they were going to do it, right? I don't know how he was going to stab him, he was going to cut his throat, whatever. He couldn't just hold his hand up and say, okay, I got the knife in position. I'm holding his chin back. I'm ready. Right? He's got to be committed. That's why I think that on that moment, Abraham's hand started down. He was ready to make the cut, and the angel stopped him. Say again? He was committed. He was committed. Judah here is in the same place. This is not theoretical. He is committed. He has made the offer, and he is going through with it. In his heart, in his mind, he has already committed the act of sacrifice. Okay? New Testament teaches us what? No greater love has any man than this, that he lay down his life for another, or in this case, a brother. Oh, it's outside. Okay. I was like, John? Okay. So remember, we talked about this promise. Okay, we talked about this too. Remember, Judah made this promise to his father. He was sincere about this promise. He will keep this promise for the next 2,000 years. It will take a couple of decades. Right? So remember we talked about that, right? When the tribes, the kingdom was split, the northern tribes went up to the north, and Judah stayed down in the south, and the nation, 10 tribes were up in the north, and they were called Israel. And Judah, which was called the kingdom of Judah, there were 2 tribes. There was Judah and Benjamin. Some 2,000 years later, Judah still has Benjamin under his wing. So sincere, so deeply held was this commitment to protect his little brother that the entire tribe, down through generations, honored that promise. Okay? So, no one has left Benjamin. All the brothers are there. Okay? I imagine in this scene, in my mind's eye, I see Judah kind of creeping toward the throne and bowing down. But I see the other brothers surrounding Benjamin. And they're not splitting up going, look, if he gets mad and throws a dart at you, an arrow or something, I'm getting out of the way. They were surrounding him. Have you ever seen Cape buffalo or elephants? protecting a young one, a little one from a lion, you know what they do? Right? Yeah. Yeah, they put the baby in the middle and they surround the baby. And they're like, okay, you want the baby, you're coming through me. And of course, that's usually enough to dissuade any attackers, right? But that's what I see here. I see Judah, and he's taking the forefront, but the other brothers, they're surrounding, they're with Benjamin. They refuse to leave Benjamin.
Think about Job, the hedge.
Job, the hedge, exactly so. Just like God had planted a hedge around Job. The brothers are hedging around Benjamin. Now, who's seeing all this? Who's watching this take place? Joseph. And a few words, but when he speaks one, Joseph. Joseph thought his family had abandoned him. He thought they were a lost cause. And now he's witnessing the kind of love, the kind of loyalty, right, that he's always wanted to see in his brothers. He witnesses this scene. He watches his brothers refusing to leave Benjamin's side. Judah, the ringleader of the sin against him. Right? Judah was the ringleader. Remember, he learned this in the first visit. And he said, Judah's the ringleader. He's begging for mercy for his baby brother. Offering his life for Benjamin as a price to pay to prevent his own father's grief. Judah, the prime architect of the reason Joseph is there, is on a knee, or both knees, or bowed down and laying flat. I don't know how he was, but he was very subservient before Joseph, begging for the life of Benjamin. Take me. Take me. Okay? Incredible. The phrase here, let me stay, right? Let me stay. Let Benjamin go home. Let me stay. Okay? It's a simplistic translation, but it's the same phrase that God used with Abraham when he showed him the ram to sacrifice. The phrase is in the place of. Okay? And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up, the ram, for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. In the place of. Okay? Judah's not just saying, I need to stay. He's offering in the place of. I'll take his place. Again, we come to the New Testament. We come to Christ, right? And who did Christ die for on the cross? He died for us. What does that mean? We say that, oh, he died for us. He died in our place. He took upon him all of the wrath, all of the punishment, all of the ire, all of the frustration that God would have poured out on us. And he took it because he was in our stead, in our place. Okay? It's too much for Joseph. Witnessing all of this take place, seeing how his brothers have grown and changed, and the work that God has done, it is too much for Joseph. Right? And he loses his resolve. His emotion overcomes him. And we see that in chapter 45, verses 1 through 15. Joseph could stand it no longer. He's done a pretty fair job of holding it together, but he can stand it no longer. Now, there were many people in the room. He said to his attendants, out, all of you. And so he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. He broke down and wept. He wept so loudly the Egyptians could hear him. He'd sent him out of the room. But he was a basket case. Now, can you imagine?
It says
This-
even the Pharaoh heard him.
Huh?
It says even the Pharaoh heard him.
Yeah. Can you imagine, though, his brothers, right? They still don't know who he is. And he's broke down and crying and sobbing. I mean, we're talking about ugly crying. Right? You've been there, right, Lane? You've been there, ugly crying. Right? tears running down his face, makeup all smeared. You understand about makeup all being smeared, right? I'm teasing. Right? He's a basket case. Because God is healing him. God is healing him right there. He broke down, he wept. He wept so loudly the Egyptians could hear him, and word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. Then he makes the announcement. I am Joseph. He said to his brothers, is my father still alive? Now remember, when he first asked about his father, you remember how he referred to him? Is the old man your father? Now it's, is my father still alive? But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. I mean, here 1 minute he's the Grand Vizier, right? Vice Pharaoh, right? Deputy dog. And then he says, I am Joseph. What did he say? He said he was Joseph. Joseph who? Our Joseph? Right? No, he can't be our Joseph, right? And so he says, please come closer, he said to them. So they came closer. And he said again, I am Joseph, your brother whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. Now, I imagine at this moment, right, it's starting to hit them, right? I don't know, maybe they're starting to recognize him, maybe start to hit him. And so they've come closer. And it's like, oh, no, this is Joseph that we sold into slavery. Ooh. And he's a vice pharaoh. Whoa, let's not, okay, I hear my daddy calling, right? I gotta go, right? And that's why Joseph says, please don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. Joseph has recognized that his misfortune is God's plan. This famine that has ravaged the land for 2 years. You remember earlier on we tried to guesstimate based on what we knew at that moment in time? And 2 years is about right, isn't it? That we were just about dead on. 2 years will last. The famine has ravaged the land for 2 years, will last 5 more years. There will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors, right? So it was God who sent me here, not you, and he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of his entire place, the governor of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me master over all the land of Egypt. And so come down to me immediately. You can live in the region of Goshen, where you can be near me with all your children and grandchildren, your flocks and your herds, and everything you own. What else does this sound like? When Jesus comes back for us. He says there'll be a trumpet. We'll rise to meet him in the air, right? There'll be some noise. You know what it's going to be? I used to think that sound that was mistaken for a trumpet was Jesus calling our names, right? And I think what he's going to do is he's going to roll back the curtain of heaven. He's going to step forward and he's going to say, I am Jesus, your brother. Come and be with me. I have a place prepared for you. Isn't that what we're seeing right here with Joseph? He said, you can live in the region of Goshen. I have prepared a place where you can be near me with all your children. Right? And grandchildren, your flocks, your herds, everything you own. Come down. All right. I will take care of you there. I will take care of you there. There are still 5 years of famine ahead of us. Otherwise, you, your household, and all your animals will starve. And then Joseph added, look, you can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that I am really Joseph. Now, he's speaking to them in the Hebrew, right? And as he speaks, they become more convinced and more convinced that he is who he's claiming to be. Go tell my father of my honored position here in Egypt. Describe for him everything you have seen, then bring my father here quickly. Weeping with joy, he embraced Benjamin. And Benjamin did the same. Benjamin was the first to hug him back. Then Joseph kissed each of his brothers and wept over them. And after that, they began talking freely with him. Okay? So the brothers are stunned, right? Really stunned. They're speechless. Wouldn't you be? Right? But notice this. It isn't until Joseph kisses them, until he draws them into his arms and kisses them, right? Which signifies forgiveness, complete forgiveness. That's when they begin to talk with him. They wouldn't speak to him before. Not until he demonstrated to them his love. Right? Notice what he tells them to tell his father, right? He says, go tell my father of my honored position here in Egypt. Describe for him everything you've seen, then bring my father here quickly. This tickles me no end. Because it seems like no matter how old we boys get, right, we want to impress our fathers. Go tell your dad, go tell dad, right, everything you see. Tell him, I'm the master of Egypt, right? We always want to ask, Pop, are you proud of me yet? Are you proud of me yet? Right? That's what Joseph is. He's still a little boy. He's still a little boy looking for daddy's approval. All right. Now, in the next few verses, we will see that Joseph's emotional reunion was not a quiet one. Right? The whole house heard it. He was told to Pharaoh, who immediately told Joseph, get your family down here and I will take care of them. Right? The Pharaoh was very grateful to Joseph for saving Egypt. He said, we'll take care of them, right? This gives us indication how much Pharaoh cared for Joseph. Now, I didn't read this verse. I'm going to skip a few verses here, but I find it funny that in verse 24, as Joseph sends them back to his father, right, he says, now go back quick, get dad. And what does he say? He says, don't quarrel about this along the way. Right? I like the King James. It says, don't fall out over this. Don't go to blaming one another. The past is in the behind. To quote Simba, right? The past is behind us. Leave the past where it belongs. How much can we change what we did yesterday by worrying over it? How much? None of it, right? We can't change anything we did yesterday. All we can do is move forward. And that's what he's telling them here. He said, don't fall out along the way. Don't quarrel about this along the way. Don't start blaming one another. You sold Jeeves. Your idea to sell Joseph. I just wanted to kill him. Right? Don't get started with that.
Could you imagine what was going through the mind whenever Joseph was younger and he would tell about the dreams he had, about how all of them would bow down before him?
And now they're standing there all bowed down before him. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Right? And so, trying to finish up here real quick. And they left Egypt and returned to their father, Jacob, in the land of Canaan. They get home. Joseph is still alive, they told him. And he is governor of all the land of Egypt. Jacob was stunned at the news. He couldn't believe it. But when they repeated to Jacob everything Joseph had told them, when he saw the wagons, now remember, when they left the first time, what did they have? Donkeys. They're carrying the grain on donkeys. What did it mean they were doing? Walking. They were walking, and the donkeys was carrying the grain. Now what do they got? Wagons. Joseph sent a whole caravan because he said, my daddy's not going to walk the whole way. my daddy's going to ride, and y'all going to ride home. Okay? And so, but when he saw the wagons Joseph had sent to carry him, their father's spirits revived. And Jacob explained, "It must be true. My son Joseph is alive. I must go and see him before I die." Okay? So, I got this. Jacob can't believe his ears or his sons, right? So he's so stunned that he actually collapses. Because we see him reviving a few minutes later in the verses, right? He actually collapses. They tell him, now, so play this in your mind's eye. There are 11 boys, or 11 men, 11 brothers. All right? And they come boiling into the tent, right? They get home, right? And there's the hubbub, right? They're coming in, and it's like, oh, who's this coming? Who's this coming? Because they didn't leave with wagons, right? And so the servants are out there, the women folk are out there, the children, the grandchildren, they're all out there. Oh, they're coming. Grandpa, Jacob, they're home, they're back. And look what they got. So now Jacob's standing in the door of his tent. And he's looking. He's like, what in the world is all this stuff? And all 11 of these brothers come running up to Dad to share the good news. All 11 of them. Hollering and speaking at once. Joseph's alive! Joseph's alive! He said, what are you talking about? What? Joseph is alive! And he can't believe it. He collapses, right? They catch him. And the brothers continue to talk, of course. They're telling him about the entire adventure. He's governor of Egypt. Okay? At some point, I don't know if it happened here or not. It may have happened on the way back. But at some point, the whole truth comes out. You know it had to. How is this possible? Well, Dad, we really sold him, right? And just brought you the coat with blood on it to make you think he died, right? So, but Jacob is past caring. Jacob doesn't care. He doesn't care. He said, what? What does he say? He's alive. My baby boy is alive, right? Notice his immediate reaction. I must go. I must go. Right? I can see in my mind that he is not waiting. I can see him walking north or south, walking south. He's, okay, I gotta go. And he takes off. The brothers have to hold him back. No, Dad, we got to pack. We got to get ready. I must go. Right? I must go. Joseph is alive. That is the reaction that we seek, that we must have when we find that Jesus is alive. Jesus is alive. I must go. I must go. Not tomorrow. Not the next day. It's why ministers for these last 2,000 years have pleaded, make your decision now. I must go. I must go. Right? And so, Jacob, like I said, I'm skipping a little bit, so there's a lot in the story that's between this, but it's mostly they get ready, they pack up, they go. So Jacob set out for Egypt with all his possessions. And when he came to Beersheba, this is why I wanted to include these verses, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father, Isaac. During the night, God spoke to him in a vision. Jacob, Jacob, he called. Here am I, Jacob replied. I am God, the God of your father, the voice said. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make your family into a great nation. I will go with you down into Egypt, and I will bring you back again. Get this. You will die in Egypt, but Joseph will be with you to close your eyes. Death is inevitable for us. But what God has just promised Jacob here is a death surrounded by his family, especially his baby boy, the one that he lost, the one that he's been grieving for all these years. God has answered of prayer. He said, you will be with Joseph when you die. Okay? And so, Beersheba is the place that Abraham had lived, and he had built there an altar. The name of Beersheba means well of oath. So there's a well there as well. As well, there's a well, a water well. The oath here that's being referred to is the agreement between Abraham and Abimelech for the rights to the land. Beersheba was kind of the southernmost outpost for the Jews, right, on their way to Egypt. And so he stopped at this place where God had spoken to Abraham, where God had spoken to Isaac, where they had sacrificed. And he was on his way to Egypt, and he was like, oh, wait, I better stop. Better stop in and knock on God's door and make sure this is okay. Now, why? Why would he do that? Possibly there's some inner conflict in him because he's leaving the land that's been promised to Abraham and his descendants, which is to say him, right? Egypt is a place where Abraham went and had to leave, where his father Isaac went and had to leave. They had doubtless told him the stories, Egypt is a pagan place. You don't want to be going down there. And so he was going into Egypt, and, he's having maybe second thoughts. And so he stopped. And so God had warned his father Isaac to avoid Egypt. God's response also gives us a window into this possible conflict of Jacob, right? When he said, go, I have sent you, I will be with you. In other words, it's all part of the plan, okay? At peace now, Jacob leaves the country. All right, skipping just a little bit ahead, verse 28. As they neared their destination, Jacob sent Judah ahead to meet Joseph and get directions to the region of Goshen. So Goshen is an area down in the Nile Delta where it was really good grazing, right? And so they were shepherds and herdsmen, and that's where they were going to stay. Now, the Egyptians, they thought that shepherds and people who raised cattle, and they were kind of hillbillies, right? We don't associate, right? You hillbillies, you stay out there in the country. Don't be coming into messing with us city folk, okay? So they kind of looked down on it. So as they neared their destination, Jacob sent Judah ahead to meet Joseph, get directions to the region of Goshen. And when they finally arrived there, Joseph prepared his chariot and traveled to Goshen to meet his father Jacob. When Joseph arrived, he embraced his father and wept, holding him for a long time. I imagine so. Right? He latched on to Daddy. Daddy latched on to him. And they just stood there and cried, or sat there and cried, or whatever it was, okay? Finally, Jacob said to Joseph, now I am ready to die, since I have seen your face again, and I know that you are still alive. So we see father and son are reunited. Jacob is now at peace. Remember, we talked about this early on. He could not be comforted. The grief that he had, he could not be comforted. Right? He wouldn't take comfort in his wives. He wouldn't take comfort in his grandchildren. He took some comfort in Benjamin, but nothing was enough to give him solace until he had Joseph in his arms again. Okay? He can die happy and content. All the misery, depression, the grief, all that's gone now. So there are roughly 70 members of the family now. That's how big the family is. There are 70 of them. So if you look on a really good church Sunday morning here in church, we'll have about 70 people. Right? That's the family now. And they've all gone to live. And Goshen is the place. And it's a very fertile place. It was a very good place. It wasn't the promised land, but it was the land of Goshen. My grandmother, that was her favorite expression, if you will. Land of Goshen, child. Right? That's the way she would say it. Land of Goshen. Land of Goshen was a garden, came synonymous with a garden place, not the promised land, but a good place. Okay? Land of Goshen was a pleasant place to live at first. And here, now they'll be here 400 years when God calls Moses to lead his people out. 400 years later. The wealth that we saw Egypt acquire during this time will go with Israel 400 years from now, from this time, as they exit in the Exodus, right? And so we'll begin now that we've set the stage. We'll fast forward and we'll look at the Exodus in the next 6 to 9 months.
More than 5 years.
No, we'll study through the Exodus. Look at several months. So now also, are we off? Oh, okay. So also, I've had a suggestion, a request, and I don't mind doing this. So what I would like for you to do that the thought was, the idea was, we spend a Wednesday night asking questions. Stump Brother Eric, okay? So write your questions down. I know Carl's going to say, "Where's God come from?" So, but write your questions down, right? Put them on a 3x5 card or whatever, and start bringing them up here. And when I have several, what we'll do is we'll take a break from wherever we're studying. I know that's Shane. I did say Carl, because that's Carl's question. Carl loves to ask that question. Where'd God come from? And he's got to answer. He's good. Right there in the Bible it says, I forget what it is, but he comes from a place. So anyway, but write them down. Write your questions down. Right? You can put more than one on a card, but write whatever question you want me to answer. Anything I can't answer, I can almost guarantee you that Brother Shannon can answer. And what we'll do is when I have enough of those, we'll spend a Wednesday just asking and answering questions, okay? Is that okay? So write your questions down, give them to me, fill up a card, give it to me, or just write one on a card, give it to me, and then next week if you think of another one, write it down and give it to me, and we'll y'all arguing about who's going to get which side of the card.
I said you just need a box.
Okay, yeah, I'll get a box. We'll put a box somewhere. You can just drop them in the box.
Call them right at Carol Wednesdays.
Yeah. So, all right. So, do we have any prayer requests?
Remember the family in Baytown and also dog. As far as I know, what I've heard and read, they have not released the family names out there. Those are all $2.
Yeah.
Families on top.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. All right.
Memphis goes Friday to his cardiologist.